My Lords, I rise with great pleasure following the Noble Lord Lord Hunt of King's Heath, the Noble Lord Lord Fox and the Noble Lady Baroness Noakes to agree with everything all of them said. And I'm going to be quite brief. I have 3 points to make. I rise chiefly to speak to Amendment 177, to which I've attached my name, as have the Noble Lords Hayne and Hendy. But I also want to comment on a couple of other of the groups of amendments in this group. I do also want to join others in welcoming the Noble Lady, the Minister, to her new post. And isn't it good to have some certainty in politics? And at least we've got the certainty that the procurement bill will come round again, whatever else we might be doing or facing in other parts of the Westminster system. And there is a phrase about the certainty of death and taxes. Except, of course, we know that taxes are not a certainty for many of the companies now operating in the UK or indeed collecting many government contracts. Now, the Noble Lord Hunt of King's Heath referred to one of those companies in particular, a company that I describe as the Great Parasite, which is a company that doesn't pay its workers very well, which relates to another amendment from the Noble Lord Hendy we'll get to later, and that pays little or no tax in the UK. And I think there's a point to be made specifically here that the government, I'm sure, would say that it wants to see government and official money being spent well. Now, if you look at the Tax Justice Network, they note that looking at definitions of tax havens, another term for them is secrecy jurisdictions. When companies are operating out of tax havens, it's extremely difficult to see what's happening with their money, how they're operating. And, of course, they are not paying for the facilities and services that they need to run their business to make their profits. When I'm thinking about the Great Parasite, the example I give often talking to schools, colleges, community groups, is imagine the road outside and think of all the lorries that have been carrying Amazon parcels up and down that road today, and who's paying for that road. All of us in this room are, but Amazon is not. So if the government is concerned about value for money in government procurement, if it's concerned about transparency in government procurement, then I would say that Amendment 177 and indeed the associated 180 are absolutely essential additions to this bill. Now, I want to also pick up on the points from the Noble Lady Baroness Noakes about the issues of competition. And I think it's interesting that this is an issue that's coming up more and more in your Lordship's House. Indeed, it was just raised in the main chamber by the Noble Lady Baroness Jones of Whitchurch in the oral question on food security and the issues of the concern about lack of competition among giant agrochemical companies that entirely dominate the global food system. And I can actually note that some members of your Lordship's House may already be aware that there is a panorama program being prepared on that very subject. And indeed, we recently saw the Financial Times covering that issue in some detail about the concern about hedge funds and cross-ownership of major companies that dominate huge parts of the market that are such crucial things such as food security. And of course, when we're thinking about this procurement bill, and it's something I have been, some might say, banging on about in your Lordship's House since the first written questions I ever asked, it's procurement for our public services, particularly of food, is a crucial way in which we can both guarantee public health but also local prosperity. And I think the Noble Lady Baroness Noakes made this point, and I'd also make this point about tax havens. We've talked in earlier groups, those that we can remember several months ago, about the importance of promoting small and medium enterprises. Very few of those small and medium enterprises have 17 subsidiaries based in tax havens. They operate transparently, generally speaking, based in the UK, with all of their tax business and funds circulating in the UK paying their taxes. And if we're going to support those small and medium enterprises, a point I think I made in our earlier debate, we need to ensure that their often relatively simple, fair, transparent, straightforward arrangements do not disadvantage them when lined up against giant multinational corporations. Now, I want to make one final point. The group of amendments, I won't go through them all, but relating to money laundering, bribery, etc. And I do want to point members of this committee, who don't think very many of them were actually in this very chamber a couple of weeks ago when my noble friend Baroness Jones of Moulscombe secured a short question for short debate on corruption. Now, I know that I often struggle to get the government to listen to me in promoting issues of addressing corruption, although I do see that we've seen quite a change in tone from the first financial services bill that I took part in nearly 3 years ago now. But I would ask if the noble lady, the Minister and the government would listen to Lord Evans of Weardale, who is, of course, the chair of the Committee on Standards in Public Life, speaking in this debate on corruption secured by my noble friend. Now, he did say that he was speaking in his personal capacity, but I really would ask the noble lady, the Minister and the government to listen to these words. I quote, "The trouble with corruption is that it is an insidious threat. Once it has taken root, it is extremely difficult to get rid of. We would therefore be wise to take steps to head off any further deterioration." And the noble Lord also noted that we have turned a blind eye to perpetrators of corruption using London as a base. So, my Lords, I think these amendments are absolutely crucial and important. Whether they're even strong enough, I'm not quite sure. But I would urge the government to listen to the words of the chair of the Committee on Standards in Public Life.